Hello everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of Video Clips, last one for the week. And today I'm going to talk about consequences of the lockdown for real people, what this is doing to our communities and that sort of thing. And so I have a lot of feedback here that from people who have written to me. I've also done some research on what's going on. I'm seeing the community around me just crumble. The food banks are out of food here. The unemployment rate is ridiculously high. We have hundreds of thousands of restaurant workers unemployed just from that sector alone. So you just wonder how much more suffering humanity is going to be put through for a fake pandemic, because that's what it has been. All right, so here goes. I've been watching some of your coronavirus videos, and I just want to mention how grateful I am for the fact that you're putting this content out there. I completely agree that the reaction is almost certainly a great deal worse than the virus itself. I'm appalled at the media hysteria and what it seems to have led to. I'm also appalled at the lack of diversity and public health voices out there. There are people with different opinions, but they're given no airtime or respect. I work as a respiratory doctor in a London hospital, and I can agree there's been a noticeable increase in viral pneumonias needing oxygen therapy. The real story is how unhealthy these people are to begin with. Even in cases with, quote, no underlying health problems, you go to review the patient and can't help but notice that they're obese, that they haven't seen their family doctor in years. How can we say they have no underlying medical problems? Meanwhile, there's no advice on how to improve population health in order to better deal with infections, like eating a plant-based diet. The other thing to point out, as you mentioned, is how many people are going to die of other medical problems during this time because they cannot or do not want to seek medical attention for fear of catching the virus. For example, I've noticed a raise in cases of diabetic ketoacidosis in diabetics as they cannot get advice on their sugars from their diabetic nurse. Meanwhile, I'm convinced there are people having myocardial infarctions at home because our cardiology wards are half empty, something I've never seen before. Meanwhile, the hospital we refer patients to for angiograms will only accept swab-negative patients, meaning if you come in with an MI, your procedure must first be delayed enough for you to have a negative swab, and if your swab is positive, you're just given medical management. All operations have to be open because gas used for laparoscopies is deemed too risky for transmitting the virus, even though it inflates the abdomen, not the chest. Cancer screening for cervical, breast, and bowel cancer in Scotland is completely stopped, which has obvious consequences. All these policies have no deadlines for review, so who knows how long we will carry on like this for. And nobody cared when hospitals were overrun every winter and we had no staff or ITU beds then. My hospital is currently running with 4 times more doctors in the field of it, with 4 times less doctors in internal medicine. Where are all these doctors when we have the early winter pressures? And yet we have the fewest patients we have ever had because the only people coming in are coronaviruses and corona cases. So this is a real doctor in London basically saying, if you have, think about this a minute, if you have a heart attack and you go to the cardiology ward, you can't have a procedure until you're swab negative. I mean, this is just unbelievable. All right, this will touch your heart a little bit. My privately owned animal hospital business is being severely impacted by not being closed as it's still open, but because my client's income is being decimated by the stay-at-home order. We're aware that many pets are not receiving the care they need due to their owners no longer having adequate income. Many procedures and treatment and parasite protection strategies are being delayed in anticipation of owners thinking they'll be able to pay for these items in a month or 2 or 3. I question this rosy thinking, and I'm far more concerned that most clients will be facing more dire financial constraints in May and June and onward than they are now. I hope that I'm wrong. The delay in health care for their pets is certainly not going to decrease the cost needed for treatment. Herd immunity is a sound strategy for disease outbreak prevention. Nearly all members of society know or love someone who has significant risk factors for any infectious illness. Herd immunity helps protect those at risk. The greatest missed opportunity in this crisis is failure of our society leaders to educate people about logical and effective means of prevention of disease spread to those at risk. The waste that could be used in real need situations is rampant. I've observed clients wearing gloves and masks when they visit my hospital who demonstrate they have no clue how to actually use such things effectively. It's ridiculous. Going on, Ashland County, where I live, has about 53,000 residents. We have an official tally of 5 CV positive persons. Meanwhile, nearly 2 people die every minute in the USA from cardiovascular disease, yet Dunkin' Donuts and Tim Hortons are embraced as wonderful additions to our community. I think your description that our leader's response is insanity fits quite well. Another one, I also want to thank you for your commentaries on the current lockdown we're experiencing in the country. I agree with everything you say. My significant other is an ER doctor in Arizona. He has seen many people for panic attacks and 2 attempted suicides. One was successful after she was flown out. He had 1 person die from complications of the flu and another in critical condition due to the flu. He said all people he had tested so far, there were still more tests to come in. Only 1 person from a nursing home was tested positive for COVID-19 in the span of 10 days. So here's somebody who's saying, I'm treating a lot more people for suicides and panic attacks than COVID-19. Now here's some data that I found. According to research conducted at Johns Hopkins in conjunction with a congressional hearing many years ago, a 1% increase in the unemployment rate sustained over a period of 6 years has been associated during the past 3 decades with increases of 36,887 total deaths, 20,240 cardiovascular deaths, 920 suicides, 648 homicides, 495 deaths from cirrhosis of the liver, 4,227 state mental hospital admissions, and 3,340 state prison admissions. Now, this has been validated by several other studies. I did some research into this. So as of April 16th, 22 million Americans have filed for unemployment. We now are at 18% unemployment in the United States. So using the above data, here's what we can expect. 663,966 deaths total. 16,560 suicides, 11,664 homicides, 7,686 deaths from cirrhosis of the liver, 60,120 more prisoners in state prisons, 79,686 additional inpatient admissions for mental health. As of April 16th, there were 31,071 deaths from COVID-19. Now, I don't want to discount those 31,000 deaths, but we should be looking at the risks and the benefits of anything that we do in health, anything that we do. And when the risks outweigh the benefits, then we have to stop it. And this is a clear situation where the damage that we're inflicting, the collateral damage, is just amazing. And people should be outraged about this. I am. And you know, I'm a lot calmer today than I was Tuesday, but I'm just wondering, for people who watch all this and they're not outraged, what is wrong with you? How could you not be upset about this? Here in Ohio, an inmate was released early due to concerns about coronavirus in prisons. He was arrested less than 1 month later on drug charges. He was released, and then a day later he committed murder, or at least he's accused of that, so now he's in jail without bond. Also here in Ohio, on April 13th, there were 11 overdose deaths in Franklin County. And this is a quote, while more attention is being paid to the COVID outbreak, overdose deaths appear to be on the rise. There have been an average of 12 overdose deaths a day over the past 7 days. These are uncertain and stressful times for everyone. This is a quote from Erica Clark Jones, who's CEO of the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board of Franklin County on April 14th. She said, these are uncertain and stressful times for everyone. Isolation and physical distancing from our friends and family has resulted in many drinking more alcohol and experimenting with drugs to cope with fear, depression, and boredom. Now, this is while we're in a situation here in Ohio where we've had 200 and some deaths. The hospitals are empty. And by the way, the lockdown isn't going to end right away because our brilliant director of public health says that we had to do this to flatten the curve, and now that the curve is flat, we have to keep it flat so we all stay inside. I don't even know how to explain this. I've said this before. It's like people from Mars came down here and put chips in these people's heads, and they're controlling what they say by moving their lips from up there, and it's like a science fiction movie. All right, some stores, this comes from a reader or viewer, some stores only allow a limited number of people in the store. They say you only got 30 minutes, you can't bring in your reusable bags, and you can only use their pre-sanitized carts, no baskets. The necessities, of course, are never there. You stand in long lines and you can't put your stuff down until the next person is done. They close early to clean instead of just closing as normal and paying staff to stay late to clean. People all around my city are wearing masks. They're limiting the number of people on the transit system we have here. I have to carry around a paper that I'm an essential worker in case I'm stopped by a cop. I'm not sure if that was a state mandate or my company. I've heard talk while riding transit of people saying they will resort to criminal activity to get food and the things they need, and this was at the beginning of the lockdown. It's all very surreal. The lack of critical thinking in this country is unbelievable. I'm glad to see footage of people protesting in Ohio. I hear they'll be protesting in Michigan today. I can't wait for this to end, but I fear when it does, we will walk the line of repeating history. And there are protests all over the place. And I have never been a person, I've always been a law-abiding person. I think it's important to abide by the law, and I don't want to see mob rule. But unless this changes, that's what we're going to have. I've said this before. Hungry, desperate people don't care about shelter in place, and the crime rate is already going up. They don't tell you about that. They're busy saying that because people are staying home, that there's less crime, but that's not true. If you look at the real data, we're already starting to see vandalism and that sort of thing. And kids, 60% of kids are not schooling at home. They don't have internet, and they don't have any supervision. And, I don't know anybody who thinks that large numbers of teenagers with nothing to do for long periods of time is a good idea, right? Now let's look at food insecurity. According to International Panel on Sustainable Food Systems, the lockdowns and disruptions, this is a quote, triggered by COVID-19 have shown the fragility of people's access to essential goods and services. Here are just a few things mentioned in the panel's report. The most marginalized suffer the most. People with disabilities are at the highest risk. Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups are at higher risk. The elderly. Children who no longer get free meals at school. The panel reported that COVID-19 and the actions that have been taken is exacerbating inequities and discrimination. In addition to food insecurity, no access to health care, and also no resources to cope with loss of income. And here's another one. I just finished watching your latest video. As always, it's spot on. Thank you for your continued quest to find truth and balance in a world that's gone totally bonkers. It's as if everybody's partaken of the Kool-Aid by the gallons. I'm forwarding you an email from a good friend of mine who runs a center for orphans in South Africa. This is not to ask for donations, but to simply illustrate and support your observations about how the current draconian measures are affecting so many lives in so many ways, from not having enough food to eat, to losing homes and businesses, to not being able to get much needed medical attention and treatment for other issues. I myself have had to deal with pain from a possibly infected or cracked tooth for over a month now because every dentist in town has been closed and refuses to open unless it's an emergency. So what constitutes a dental emergency if not a toothache? All of one's teeth falling out? Unbelievable. And what's going on in South Africa is most likely being mirrored in all parts of the globe. I look forward, as always, to watching the next video. And so I think it's important to remind people that while this virus has turned out to be less lethal than seasonal flu, data show that. Read my Monday newsletter. We are hurting far more people with these draconian, ridiculous public health policies that have been implemented. It really is time for this nonsense to stop. And it's really going to be time soon to get organized, because I personally never, ever, ever want to see the hands of millions of people controlled by a single person in charge of the health department in a state, and the lives of hundreds of millions of people controlled by a doctor who gets on TV every day and quotes misinformation and nobody calls him on it. Okay? That's what I don't want to see ever happen again. And so it'll soon be time to get busy and start working on plans to make sure that never happens again. All right, that's it for today and for the week. I will be back to you next week with more news about all of this. I'm writing about it constantly, and I'll share with you whatever I can. I mentioned on Tuesday I'm writing a book about it now, and I have people digging up information for me and checking out all kinds of things, and as soon as I know it, you'll know it. And I think the only thing we can do, they say the best disinfectant is sunlight. Okay, so let's shine a light on all of this nonsense and show these people for what they really are. And let's take our country back. Let's take our lives back. Let's take our community back. This is ridiculous. Have a great weekend. I'll be back to you next week with more news.